After a 2-year wait, the second volume of Love, Death, and Robots is finally here. But with half the episode count as the first volume, can this volume manage to be as memorable as the first? I believe the answer to that question is dependent on what you want to see from an anthology show like this. For me, the biggest issue with this volume was that there were only 8 episodes, and not a big variation in animation styles were present. Of the 8 episodes this volume, only 1 uses 2D animation. Meanwhile, half of this volume consists of animation striving for a hyper-realistic look. Personally, I would have liked to see more unique styles of animation presented here, since I believe if you're trying to make your animation as realistic looking as possible, why not just do it in live action at that point? I don't mind the occasional animation looking hyper-realistic, since it can be very impressive to see just how realistic they can look. However, half of this volume being in the same style just made those episodes sort of blend together for me. With only 8 episodes this volume, I thought the selection of stories would be better. However, there were quite a few that still just did not work for me or seemed pretty generic. Overall, there were still a few episodes that I enjoyed. However, the shorter episode count and the overuse of one animation style left this volume feeling a little underwhelming compared to the first volume. Now, I'll go through each episode from my least to most favorite and just give my brief thoughts on each one, starting with this episode is about a scientist who comes back to a beach where a giant's corpse is washed up. He just wants to observe the giant, and overall, this felt like a waste of an episode. The style of animation strives to make it look as real as possible. However, I don't feel this really justifies being animated. This easily could have been done in live action, and may have been easier and cheaper to do it that way. I just found this episode to be really boring, and it's just about a scientist who just comes back to watch a dead giant. Nothing too special to see here. Life Hutch is about a pilot who crash lands on a planet with no atmosphere and needs to find a life hutch to survive. However, once he finds the life hutch, the episode starts to feel a lot like Alien, with a malfunctioning robot that tries to hunt him down. Now, there's nothing really bad per se about this episode, it's just, personally, I didn't like what happens in it. There's a part where the pilot's hand gets really mangled, and I just don't like to see that sort of thing, which is why it's so low on this list. But this episode's serviceable, but also fairly generic. Ice is the only one of these animations to be animated in 2D. And while the environments all look beautiful, it was the character models I really didn't like in this animation. I felt that the style on the human characters is just too exaggerated and didn't like the overall style of the human characters. On top of that, the story isn't too exciting. The whales looked cool and so did the landscapes, but other than that, there wasn't much that was interesting about this one. Automated customer service is about a senior citizen trying to fight off a killer vacuum. The one thing that I really didn't like about this episode was how the human characters were modeled. The way they're rendered tries to make them look as real as possible, but the proportions of the humans just did not work for me. I didn't like how the human characters looked at all here. The heads were just far too large, with their arms and legs being too small. And I just didn't like the look. Other than that, this episode goes the way you sort of expect it. There's a killer robot and a person trying not to get killed. It does try to take a more comedic approach, with the person trying to contact customer service about the killer robot and customer service being automated and not very helpful. But overall, I just didn't like this episode too much. Snow in the Desert is about a man with a bounty on his head. The episode is mostly about him being hunted by bounty hunters, and a girl who has taken interest in him for reasons other than his bounty. This is probably one of the more violent episodes this volume, and it definitely feels like it would have fit in the first volume of Love, Death, and Robots. However, it also takes a realistic approach with its animation style, and there just wasn't too much to keeping me engaged in this one. It was alright, but it was just sort of an average episode. Nothing really special about it, but it also wasn't too boring either. Pop Squad was basically just Blade Runner, except replace androids with children. Humans have unlocked the key to immortality, and so reproduction introduces the challenge of overpopulation. So, there's a special police force that's assigned to killing off kids to ensure that overpopulation does not become a problem. After the introduction scene of this episode, I found it to be extremely predictable and goes exactly the way you would expect an episode like this to go. It was pretty generic, but if you like Blade Runner, then you'll probably enjoy it. The tall grass had my favorite animation style of this volume. When a train gets stopped in the middle of a tall grass field on the prairies, a man who looks a lot like H.P. Lovecraft steps off the train to take a smoke. However, he is curious about blue lights that he sees shining through the grass and goes out to investigate what they are. However, he cannot find his way back to the train and begins to fear that which lurks in the light. The pacing and length of this episode was nearly perfect, and overall it was just pretty enjoyable to watch. Doesn't overstay its welcome, and the ending leaves enough questions to leave you wondering what would have happened, or what exactly is going on in this location. All Through the House is my favorite episode this volume. While it is the shortest, it's also one that's best to go in blind. It's a Christmas episode about two children, and the animation style is very reminiscent of the classic stop-motion animated Christmas movies such as Rudolph. I don't want to spoil too much about this one, but I did find it to be the best out of all of them. But those are just my thoughts on this volume of Love, Death, and Robots. What was your favorite episode? Let me know in the comments, and until next time, thanks for watching.